Welcome to Finding Humans in Tech, where we uncover the extraordinary stories behind the technology shaping our world. This isn't just about innovation, it's about the people, the dreamers, the doers, and the changemakers whose journeys remind us that humanity is the soul of every breakthrough. Get ready to be inspired, to connect, and to celebrate the resilience and passion that drive the tech community forward. Let's dive into the stories that prove technology is nothing without the humans behind it. It was a summer ago when we were introduced to this incredible human in a Linux group. Clouds of smoke filled the room from his vape. This young Iraqi Yun, with a cheeky sense of humor, would bring in resounding laughter from any crowd around him. He still grimaces whenever I call him out and tells me it's Ahmed, not Ahmed. Then he would gesture for me to roll my tongue and stress on the ha. I am rather surprised that he hasn't given up on me yet. So, here's introducing our next human in the series, a young 20-something medical device engineer in the making. He was each day filling out forms and sometimes handing out tongue-in-cheek advice to very demanding patients in one of the busiest hospitals in the city. And that's how I met our next human, the young flamboyant Ahmed Hamid, with a wicked wit and a love for vaping. He was as Gen Z as one can get, but beneath the exterior lies this awfully kind human who has seen way more in life than any of us could ever imagine. In all my conversations with Ahmed, an interesting question he would always ask was how I was seated. "I hope you are seated comfortably," he would ask me each time. I always thanked him for being kind enough to ask and assure him I was seated cozily. His tone suggested a genuine concern, and I was always intrigued by why this information between two unexpected strangers seemed so important to him. It was later, through our marvelous discussions, that I figured out he had a part-time job in a hospital facility. He would seamlessly transition from talking about server systems to informing me that most techies have lumbar spine nerve damage due to our prolonged hours of being chained to the desk because of our demanding jobs. I had to admit that I was guilty of that too. He would chastise me further and say, "You are going to kill your back someday, you know." Every time I slumped down in my work chair, I am now reminded of this painful episode where he witnessed a spinal reconstruction surgery. And I can't help but grin to know how he has ingrained that image forever in my head. That was his unique way of caring about people. And this is reflected in his workplace too. As he admits, he had to don a few hats too many. One day, he was the receptionist. Another day, he was figuring out an issue in the server system or helping patients figure out their medical accounts. We would laugh about the trivial questions he would get from disgruntled patients. One day, it was the price of a needle. Another day, it was rubbing alcohol. Each day, it brought out a new concern. "The patients simply don't have patience," he would lament. I pointed out how it rhymed perfectly, and he would shake his head in disbelief and roll his eyes. Here, he was taking up a job that drew him in because one of the requirements was to handle the hospital's server systems. It was a task that, once again, brought him closer to working with a technology that had fascinated him as a young child. And as he would like me to add, that it did help that some visitors were beautiful women. So I asked him if the women in the hospital intrigued him more. He chuckled and told me it was obviously the server system. There we go. Classic Ahmed. The best part about his workplace was Abbas, an Indian migrant who makes what he calls throat-burning and gut-wrenching masala chai. He would exclaim, "That bloody guy burns a hole in your throat." Keeping the magical tea aside, he did find a friend and a mentor in the much older Abbas. It made his workplace more appealing and vibrant. He animatedly explains how Abbas, even years later, still hasn't been able to call him Ahmed, and his attempt to impersonate him didn't really make much of a difference to Abbas or me. I cracked up at how he still hasn't given up on Abbas too. We are all getting there. There was more lurking beneath the surface of this young, dynamic man who cared deeply for the people around him. His story is something of resilience and endurance. For most of his childhood, he was separated from his family, the result of geopolitics that still affects millions across the world. When I asked him how he got through that phase, he gleefully told me that the kids he grew up with would play football together and nothing else around them mattered. And hearing him talk about it transported me to a place down the lanes of Baghdad, a bunch of young boys cheering and giggling over football, bonding over a sport that has been bringing together people for decades. They were forming a family they could call their own through their circumstances. And that was Ahmed's humble beginnings. He reminds me that it wasn't such a bad memory as once he got to know all the other kids on a first-name basis. He had a wonderful time playing all sorts of sports with them. One particular evening, it was basketball that kept the children company, and another day, it was volleyball. It reminded me of an essay my high school teacher had once read to us about how Jesse Owens' win at the 1936 Berlin Olympics wasn't just an achievement, it was a beacon of hope for humanity. Sports wasn't just a game, it had the potential to change lives. Those giggling voices of young little boys echoed through our conversation that day. It made us realize how it was never our circumstances that curtailed us. It's our perception that truly limits us. And Ahmed showed us how sometimes we fail to see the beauty of life in the smallest of things around us. He acknowledged that his interest in technology began as a means to fill the void of separation. He started out tinkering with old PCs, much to the annoyance of his elder brother, and he would find ways to hide from him and sit down to sometimes dismantle his brother's computers. I teased him a little on whether his brother's attitude towards him spending too much time in front of the computer contributed to his interest even more. We both ended up laughing. There was a universal truth. No matter which corner of the world you lived in, you don't tell a rebellious teenager what to do. And it was true. For all the tech geeks out there, we all have been told or chastised for spending way more time in front of a computer than we should. Those were indeed the good old days of discovering a new world, of innocence and unwavering dreams. I imagined a young boy working through the night endlessly, creating a world of his own. When I asked him what interested him the most in those days, he reminded me of Visual Basic and MS-DOS and how he created his first calculator. It made a lasting impression on a young teenager who found something he could call his own using programming languages. His interest in Linux systems started when he discovered how to change desktop backgrounds using the terminal. Kaylee, Linux changed his perception of the whole world of tech. He confided that he felt like a CTO of his imaginary tech company. Cybersecurity is one domain he truly feels is where his heart is. There was no stopping him from diving deeper into the subject. His story does give you hope about how technology has changed lives for the better, and continues to do so. He represents the next generation of tech-savvy Middle Easterners putting their best foot forward in the tech domain. He earnestly talks about his friends at his university, including his childhood sidekick Saif, and how they often catch up at their favorite spot, the piano cafe, over coffee and nargila. talking about life and politics like all young 20-year-olds with life in their footsteps. One thing he wishes to see is a boom in the tech industry of his hometown. He explains how the youth still choose to go for traditional jobs in the medical sector, as the tech domain hasn't been able to generate the attention it deserves. When I asked him what he would love to change, he didn't pause for a second to reply back. The damn internet. It could be so much better. I can't fathom any Gen Z in his hometown not agreeing to this. Growing up in a world of Instagram and TikTok, he tells me how important cybersecurity has become lately. He narrates bitter episodes and tales of people who have become victims of the increasing rate of cybercrimes in his place. It's an issue he feels passionately about. He admits to attending several awareness campaigns organized by the government or the National Security Services to learn more about the situation. His dream is now to run a tech movement that could help people safeguard their data, prevent cybercrimes around him, and make his peers recognize the future that technology holds. I had read a poem by Rumi to him. On a rather poignant dawn, he patiently sat through it and told me he had never read many poems from his region. I quoted a single verse that I felt summed up his life. The wound is the place where the light enters you. He translated it into Arabic. Kili odla, haiflikti yidla, nakmala wa harjula. And we just sat there in silence as dawn broke through. He, with his prayer beads rustling through the silence, and I clutched my trusty old translation of Rumi. In that same way, dawn broke through Ahmed's life. He was reunited with his family, and we talked endlessly about his mom's famous dolma, the aromatic Iraqi delicacy. He was finally home, surrounded by people who matter to him. He quotes an Arabic phrase, Toklayi taliyala. I dread translating such powerful words from an ancient language as old as time to something else. So I asked him if he would like to translate it for me, and he breathed out a few words that most of us take for granted in our lives. Family is strength. This was his chance at healing, of another life of hope and opportunity. Our chance encounter with this wonderful human taught us the importance of perseverance and never letting your circumstances define who you are. Life is indeed a gift, and Ahmed's resolve to change his narrative has strengthened that belief. As he would add, you can't possibly end me in a tear-jerking way. I promised him I would not, and as Ahmed would like to reconfirm, there was still room for more love lurking around just right the corner. I prodded him a little further and asked who his ideal partner was. He gives off a mischievous wink and asks me if I can find him someone like Detective Chloe Decker from the TV series Lucifer, and disappeared off in a cloud of vape smoke and laughter. Classic Ahmed. As we wrap up this episode of Finding Humans in Tech, remember this: behind every line of code, every groundbreaking innovation, and every bold idea is a human story, full of passion, resilience, and the courage to dream. These stories remind us that technology isn't just about machines. It's about the heartbeats that make them meaningful. Subscribe, like, and share our channel, and keep on joining us in this journey of discovery and connection. Until next time, keep dreaming, keep innovating, and always keep shining the light. See you next time.